Hello, literacy enthusiasts, and welcome to LitFilmFest Live. I'm Tim, here to make literacy engaging and purposeful with all of you guys at home. We're going to be discussing some meaty or maybe meat-free eco topics for educators to consider today, and we're going to give you a task for your class at the end of the session as well, all about sustainability, which is an interesting term. Also, the winners of last week's competition, I'm just going to display on the screen now. Well done, all of you on the screen. You will get 5 copies of J.M. Joseph's book sent to your school. So congratulations. You did a great job telling us who the superheroes in your school were. Thank you. So joining us tonight, we have a very special guest. Hello, David. Welcome, David Roberts.
Hi, Tim.
How are you?
I'm very well.
Do you want to tell us? Oh, good. Oh, we've got a tiny delay because, David, you're actually quite a way away from me at the minute, aren't you? Do you want to tell us where you are and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm currently on the Isles of Scilly, which is the most southern tip of the United Kingdom. And I've just finished a 3-week journey all the way from Shetland. And I have been going from environmental project to environmental project to find some of the more positive sustainability stories that there are in the United Kingdom. I think it's a time when everyone needs a little bit of hope and positivity. So it's named The Journey of Hope. And yeah, here I am on the second to last day.
Wow. So yeah, so you're linking lots of sustainability projects together, aren't you, by traveling across, well, several countries, really, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. So I started in Scotland, the island of Shetland, or the Shetland Islands, and then through Scotland, mostly projects related to the ecology of the landscape and sort of rewilding projects, but also litter projects, a repair shop in Edinburgh. Wow. And then popped over to Northern Ireland, all sustainable transport, by the way. I'm not driving a 4x4.
I was going to ask. By plane. That's it.
So I've taken boats, trains, and buses, and I've walked quite a bit as well. So no cars, no planes.
That's great. And just as we go into a bit more detail, why did you decide to focus on sustainability? Why something that's sustainability projects should schools be interested in doing themselves?
I lived in China for 8 years, and I think just being in a mega city for such a long time meant that when I was coming back to the United Kingdom, I was, craving that natural space, that green space. We have some really beautiful countryside in our country. But as I've always been interested in sustainability and the environment, and I decided to take it up more academically. So I started studying a master's in sustainability and ecology. And the more you delve into things, the more you realize, you peel away that facade that we have in the UK, that everything is great. And we're actually one of the most nature depleted countries in the world.
Wow.
All that green landscape is not really that great for nature. So it's when you start to have a better understanding of these things that you think you're either going to bury your head in the sand and just try and get on with life, or you're going to try and have an impact. And that's what I've been trying to do is, obviously I still need to live life. You can't let these things overwhelm you completely that you can't function. But, they are the most important issues of our time.
And I suppose that's an interesting point for people to consider at home. Like, who has come across sustainability projects? Do you want to tell us in the comments, and maybe we can talk about some of those things? And it's interesting in the lockdown as well, isn't it? We've all been craving going out when we were only allowed to exercise 1 hour every day. You wanted to go out into the countryside. You wanted to step away from your house, didn't you? And be out in the countryside, really.
Absolutely, and one of the reasons that I suppose we have trouble at the moment is we're not really connected to that natural system anymore. So we've almost removed ourselves from the order of things in nature. But something like COVID sort of brings it home that we are part of an ecosystem. We are just a cog in the chain, I suppose. We are susceptible to viruses and to things going wrong within the ecosystems. So lockdown was obviously difficult in many ways, but it did allow people to slow down, reconsider, and sort of reflect on things that are important, and also give people a chance to get out into their parks and green spaces and reconnect with nature a bit more, which is something that is often talked about in sustainability and environmental sort of areas, is that connection with nature.
And so why do you think this is something that we should be teaching children about, and what impact do you really hope that children should go away with when learning about sustainability?
Well, I think the reason it's important is because it sustains all life on Earth. There's not really much bigger you can get than that. So, I've seen some interesting diagrams. I don't know if anyone's seen this, of a tsunami wave with COVID, and then climate change, and then the ecological collapse at the end. So it's almost saying, we can't overlook the fact that our natural systems are in danger, and that ultimately threatens our survival. The impact you're looking to make, with any project, you're really looking at behavior change. That is the key. You're looking for something that is impactful enough that makes a child either change their own behavior to become more sustainable, and then also go back into the home and into their community, and then educate people around them, their peers, and change the behavior there. Some of the environmental and sustainability things that we need to change, ultimately the government will probably and hopefully will come in with some regulation and policies and force us to do things, basically. But we can get ahead of that by changing ourselves.
Great. And just to kind of pull some of those things out that you've been talking about there, I've just pulled up your Instagram, Dave, because you've been documenting a lot of this. So do you want to tell us a bit about some of the projects that we can see just up on the screen there that you've been documenting?
Yeah, so maybe if we focus on the plastic in the middle, the fishing nets.
Yeah.
So that was on Shetland. And, Shetland are the remote islands in the middle of the North Sea. You sort of have this image of them being very pristine, but they do have a lot of big problems with plastic waste that washes up on the beach, partly due to its position and the fact that it gets battered by North Sea storms every winter. And yeah, they've organised the UK's most successful litter pickup scheme.
Oh,
so
wow.
20% of Shetland every year goes out and picks up rubbish from the beach.
Wow, 20%.
20%. I mean, if you think about it, Tim, if 20% of every population or community was engaged in it would have such an impact. So I've seen how that's really united the community. And then it's obviously not just about picking up the waste. The questions and the conversations then get asked, where is this waste coming from? And a lot of the waste on Shetland, interestingly, is fishing waste. It's bits of discarded fishing net and boxes that the fishermen don't need anymore that are chucked over into the sea. And a lot of the waste is coming from some of the grandparents of the children who are on the islands. So, they're picking up waste and going back to the house and saying, Granddad, please don't throw these plastic bits of fishing net overboard anymore. So, yeah, that project has really engaged the community. And yeah.
And that must be quite interesting to actually enthuse the kids in the locality about as well. I suppose that goes through the schools then as well, to actually have a real life impact, doesn't it, on the community through education?
Yeah. The scheme, goes right from primary school to secondary school to when they're in college, university, if they're on the islands, and then into their later life. I spoke to many people on the islands, and they all know Davor Redup, which is the big spring cleanup in the local language, and they've all worked on it in primary schools. And the great thing is that they all do it together. So there's, I think that's one of the things that's missing in sustainability projects, is everyone's doing little bits separately. And I think there needs to be a lot more collaboration and connection and linking up together.
Yeah. Just to read out a comment from Joy Adele, she says, we don't even have the capacity to recycle at school, and it's such an appalling waste. And I think that's probably a reality for a lot of schools, isn't it? Not really knowing how they can make a difference, and maybe a lot of educators can be quite frustrated, and children as well, once knowing the facts, can be frustrated at knowing that. So this problem with the fishing nets could still have been a problem if the solutions didn't exist.
Yeah, and what I would say in terms of environmental and sustainability problems and issues and potential solutions is, if you have the time, and we should be making the time because these are very important issues, but obviously I know we're all strapped for time, is do a bit more research and try to get to the bottom of things. So, my answer to not having recycling facilities would be, recycling should always be the last option. We really should be reducing what we use in terms of plastic rather than recycling. So I would suggest, if there's no recycling, and recycling has issues, a lot of what we recycle doesn't get actually recycled in the way we think it is.
Yeah. And a bit off to Bangladesh, isn't it?
Yeah, and then there's carbon emissions associated with plastic waste. So, the plastic has to be transported somewhere. Machines have to work to turn it back into something, and then that gets transported somewhere else. So it's almost a problem in itself.
And what we teach children is that recycling is positive as well, isn't it? Then they want to do something good. They want to put it in the happy bin with the mouth open. But ultimately, if it doesn't go the destination, they're going to be disappointed, aren't they, with those efforts? So
and this is why, some of the changes might be difficult. It's so convenient, and we've become so used to using things like plastic that the behavior change to push to recycle is a lot easier than actually stopping that use itself. So there's a school actually that I visited a few days ago called Damer's First School in Dorset, and they've moved away from recycling, and they've banned single-use plastic. They had a bit of pushback from some parents initially, but everyone's got used to it, and they've won awards. So it can be done. You just need someone in the school to push for it.
Yeah, and people will respect that. Parents will ultimately respect that, and the community will, won't they? And winning awards and getting articles in newspapers is fantastic, but you're doing it to that's great for public profile of the school, isn't it? But you're doing it to save the planet, to try and create consumers of the future who are very conscientious, really, those pupils. And we just had a question from Abby Curtis. He says, is there a website for the Sustainable Schools International Network, which you're the founder of, David, aren't you? And I've just pointed you to thejourneyofhope.co, which is your website, David, isn't it? To people together. And I just, at the bottom there's some resources. So sign up for the free resources that go along with your project, really. So I just wanted to highlight that for people at home.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, you can find out more information via thejourneyofhope.co. So
Great. I suppose the next kind of question was, but this is all very well and good, David, but the teachers have time to teach you about eco projects. We know spellings need to be done, PE comes in, or MFL is something that has to be taught once in a blue moon, or every week. It should be every week. Do we have time to put elements of the of green education really into what we should be covering?
I think I would flip that question around to you, Tim, and ask: Do we have time to not think about eco projects? So
Micro.
A question with a question. I would suggest go and have a look at Extinction: The Facts, which came out last week, which shocked a lot of people. People didn't realize the challenge that we have on our hands, and how fast some forms of life are becoming extinct or are at risk of extinction. And when you watch something as hard hitting and as difficult to watch as that, it does wake you up to the challenge that we have, and that means that you will focus your energy. So I could tell you, yes, you will find the time, but I won't do it as good as a job as Sir David Attenborough did in that program last week. And then I've seen schools that really do put the environment at the heart of everything they do. And it's you can either look at it as fitting the environment into the national curriculum, or fitting the national curriculum into the environment. And I've seen schools that do flip that round, so they want the environment as sustainability because they realize it's a huge issue, and our young people will really be the ones to have the bigger problem on their hand than us, because these things take time to see the damaging effect of. So
is anyone watching? Is anyone part of a school? If you want to just write in the comments below if you're part of a school, I really just focus. And you spend time in the classroom. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, but teaching the children how to be conscientious, and looking after the world. Would be really interested to know on the show itself. Yeah. Thanks, David. Yeah, that was really interesting. Do you have any quick and easy sustainability projects that a teacher could go and run with next week?
So with sustainability and the environment, I personally believe it all comes back to we've lost this connection to the natural world. We were talking before about how we need to make things more circular. So close the loops of things, and in a natural ecosystem, there's very little waste. Nothing is wasted, and I think we need to start living our lives more like we are a part of that ecosystem rather than not. So one sort of easy project that ticks quite a few boxes and also really brings that reconnection with nature home is learning all the native trees. So that trees, I say trees are the native trees are the gateway to the natural world around us. And once you start to understand that.
I think we've just lost David. He's on the other side of the country, so I think we might have just lost him from the internet. I'll just go through some comments just while we wait for him to come back. We've had a Facebook user here to just say, I think children are really passionate about these issues. We certainly found this at Gospel Oak, I think that must be the school, when we teamed up with LitFilmFest on the Take a Stand project. Fantastic. Yeah, we did a great video all about holding politicians accountable. It was particularly aimed at Boris Johnson being responsible for climate change, and creating media, as we do in LitFilmFest, creating media around these issues really get people listening to the message that needs to be spoken. Oh, good. Hi, David. We lost you there.
Hi, Tim. Sorry about that.
You're on public transport, probably, aren't you? That's the problem.
Yeah. So yeah, the idea that I have for schools that are looking to start off with something easy, with something that will
yeah, it's almost like an easy win for first dipping your feet in sustainability, environmental issues is start with native trees, oak trees, hazel trees, birch trees, and then once children start to get an understanding of the things that are around them, the natural things, they'll start to develop a curiosity, and that will really start to get them to think about ecosystems and how we are a part of those ecosystems. Yeah.
We went to New Zealand last year to Wellington, and Wellington is an area that has a very high population of non-native trees, and they've started to build habitat again with native trees in certain areas. And the areas where they had the native trees, there was a loud cacophony of animals and birds actually in the trees and living, because they were more used to living in those trees than in the like the sticky pines, really, that was in the redwoods. They're not they're not used to living in that habitat. So it works with the science, doesn't it? That if you want to encourage the wildlife to come and populate, where you live, your school grounds, you go native, don't you? You actually plant.
Absolutely.
Plant a tree is a simple thing to do. So.
It is, and as you say, it opens up all this whole world into the science behind things. So you can do biodiversity counts. You can use quadrats to count how many invertebrates are in the soil. There's always more invertebrates in the soil surrounding native trees versus non-natives. So yeah, a tree's not just a tree.
A tree's not for life. Not for Christmas. We just had another comment on Facebook. This is interesting because it leads us into our next section, saying, "Hi Tim, we're hoping to develop a small wood on the grounds next summer." That must be the school grounds. "We've started this year with some fruit trees and hope for every child to plant a tree." That's quite a big project, actually. That's pretty impressive. Thank you for sending that in. And then also we've had Catherine Bufton. She says, "Children are more concerned with eco issues than we were when we were children. We need to capture this keenness and encourage it as much as possible. They are the protectors of the future." I think that's an important point, isn't it? That you do see children being very passionate about looking after the planet and being sustainable, and you can really capture that, and they can learn a lot of literacy skills and, as you said, science skills and math skills along with that keenness to actually share a message. So yeah, thank you everyone. There's some really good ideas there, and that leads us on quite nicely, David, to talk about, are there any big whole school projects that you've seen, just like that Facebook user talked about planting a whole wood? Is there something that you've seen a school could take on or partner with?
Yeah, there's a variety of different things you can do, but I think if you have that mindset of closing those loops, as we talked about before, making things more circular, thinking of ourselves as part of a natural ecosystem, and you can look at your school in that way as well. You can look at where is the food waste that your school uses, where is it going to? There's ways you can deal with that food waste, and then you can get into all sorts of measurements in terms of how much compost you're creating with the food waste, or you can do experimentation. Have two different types of compost bins and figure out which one is producing faster, which one is lagging. The planting a woods project is fantastic because you could measure everything, and you're bringing maths, you're bringing science. You can have written reports, impact reports, if you like, from those projects. So, you could really take a look at your school and figure out, a list of things that you could possibly do. So, if you really wanted to get into that, I would suggest taking a look at Damer's First School in Dorset. They are a very, very good school in terms of what they've done in sustainability and the environment, but many other good schools. I suppose the point is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can look for things that have happened. You can find little things schools have done, or you can look at projects like the Cambrian Wildwood or the litter pick in Shetland, and we can all learn from each other. And if anyone's interested, they can sign up for the resources on my website for free. And I will be linking schools with these experts who have been there and done it, and they've been successful, and they're really, really keen to pass their message on. That's the great thing about working in environmental areas, is no one's competing in that real sense. Everyone wants to share.
And that's great, David. And you might have an expert that you don't even know about as well next door, and maybe David is the person to get in contact with who can actually pair you together. So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
We've had another lovely comment from a Facebook user. Getting connected to nature is essential too. Forest schools, outdoor learning, growing fruit and vegetables at school, and then cooking with them. Surely this is the year for everyone to get outdoors as much as possible. Appreciate nature, its beauty, the changing seasons, the awe and the wonder has to be a good starting point. I think it's lovely to see that comment, actually, because everything is just so connected with that, and applicable for all years as well. It's not, if it was to be whole school, it'd be easy, wouldn't it, to think of different tasks to get people outdoor and people growing and people be very conscientious in their sustainability and their sustainable projects. Yeah, lovely. Right, David, we're going to go on to our next section now, which is the section where you at home can use this as a lesson or starting point for a sustainability project in the future. Let's go on to the quick fire right section. We're going to be basing this quickfire right on the Cambrian Wildwood, and it's going to be focused on this question here: why do we need to restore habitats? That might be a question that you want to ask your children in the class. So, David, why do we want to restore habitats?
Well, quite simply because we've lost a lot of our habitats. The UK is, if you look at our landscape, it's very agricultural in parts. There's quite a lot of development, and we love landscape, short grass. But unfortunately, that means that we've removed a lot of the habitats that many of our native animals and life needs. So we are, as I mentioned before, a very nature depleted country. In the nature intactness scale, we're almost bottom. I think we're 189th in the world. So, if you look at, you only have to look to the continent, to France, to see that they have bears, we don't. They have wolves, we don't. They have Eurasian lynx, we don't. So there's a reason why we don't have these animals, and often it's because the habitats have been removed. So we do need to look at bringing those back, and then once we have the habitats, we can look at bringing those animals back.
Great, good answer. What different types of habitat are we responsible for looking after? Do you want to talk a little bit about the Cambrian Wildwood with this one specifically, David, as well? Tell us a little bit about that. And I've got some of your Twitter feed up as well that will reference at this.
Yeah, so the Cambrian Wildwood is a really good example of different habitats in one small location. So they actually have some of the remnants of the ancient Celtic rainforest. So you can see in some of the pictures, they have some dense woodland just in the background there. And, it really is, we're talking trees hundreds of years old. And, the Celtic rainforest is renowned for its mosses and its lichen, and you have ferns growing on top of trees, and that really only happens in that really only happens in very wet places like the rainforest. You would expect to see that in the Amazon or the Congo, but unfortunately a lot of it's been lost due to deforestation. So they have some of that on site, and that tends to be lower down. And then as you go up the hills, they have bog. They have some peat bog, which is a very underrated ecological habitat, because we're now beginning to understand that although it doesn't look nice and it doesn't look pretty, and in the past people thought that peat bogs, blanket bogs didn't really benefit us. They're really good stores of carbon, better than rainforests. So,
Wow.
we're talking about planting trees and, technology to remove carbon from the air. What we should be doing is making sure our peat bogs are restored and then looking at expanding them. So, and also they regulate flooding. So, every winter we see towns being flooded downstream or in river valleys, often because the landscape has been altered. The trees have been cut down, the bog has been drained, so that water just flows quickly off the turf, off the grass. And then also filtration of water. So any water that flows through a peat bog, it becomes cleaner. So just on that Cambrian Wildwood site, they have peat bog, they have woodland, they have lots of different types of grassland habitat as well. So a real mixed bag. And the thing about habitats is that often if we had the right animals in there, we wouldn't really need to look after it. They would do the job for us. Habitats are dynamic, they're often changing. So one of the good things and one of the reasons why people are talking about bringing these animals back is because they all play a part in regulating the ecosystems, but we've removed them. So
yeah, absolutely. We just had another comment, David. I'm not another Facebook user. I'm sure that most schools would have the capacity to help with this, even if on a small scale. Our school, for example, has actively planted a wild garden to encourage bees and other insects back, and we're situated on a very busy main road in central London. We've planted fruit trees too. Great for kids to see the way that we can do wild urban areas and learn about the benefits of the whole ecosystem. Yeah, that's lovely. You could be very constrained, couldn't you, by being in central London. But even just those small pushes, those small bits make a huge difference. I know the RHS has a big push against your driveway as well, because driveways are responsible for a lot of runoff water, and we're responsible for just having slabs of concrete. But actually, you can pull up the concrete, have some very water absorbent plants that you can actually drive over. You could do a lot of good and encourage a lot of wildlife to come into your driveway, which is amazing. Next question, David. How can we look after habitats?
So one of the ways that the Cambrian Wildwood looks after the habitat is by reintroducing some species. We call them keystone species. And a keystone species is a type of animal that has a very big impact on how the ecosystem functions. So what they've done there is they've brought back two types of animal that sort of help to look after that habitat themselves without knowing it. One is a conic pony. So it's a very hardy type of horse. And we would have had natural horses, native horses in the past, and what horses do, they eat a certain type of the grass and they graze in a certain way, so they inadvertently create a habitat for other creatures. Every creature has a niche. They have a certain type of the habitat that they use, and a lot of them have evolved alongside animals that used to be there. So by bringing the horses back, suddenly some animals will thrive. Another way is by bringing cattle, big cattle, not like your dairy cows, but very big cattle, and they trample the ground. So they keep some of the vegetation under control. A habitat without any of the animals or the species that you would expect to find can often be taken over control by one certain type of plant. But if you have different animals and species in there that should be, they help to keep it under control. So that's one way we can look after them. And we can support the people that do those projects, I suppose. The Cambrian Wildwood, the RSPB, the wildlife trusts, the National Trust to a certain extent. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's finding out where they are, isn't it, and how you can support them, even if that's manpower. Yeah, thanks, David.
Yeah.
And a selfish question in a way, but one I think has a positive outcome probably, is that, are there any benefits for us if we look after habitat?
Absolutely. And a key phrase, one that's often used in ecological terms, is ecosystem service. So the UN developed a term called ecosystem services in order to explain this question that you've asked me. So it's an ecosystem service is simply what benefits do we as humans gain from a healthy ecosystem or a healthy habitat. So some of the ecosystem services could be flood regulation. We have natural vegetation on our hillsides, then they control the flow of water runoff. So towns and cities and villages that are where the landscape has been deforested around them, they get flooded quite regularly. Things like soil formation, if we have a healthy habitat, soil is formed. Obviously we need soil. That's one of the biggest concerns actually to ecologists, is that the fertility of the soil is getting worse and worse, and in the future we need that soil. Everything we eat depends on soil, healthy soil. So they're just two of the benefits that we gain, but of course there are many ecosystem services, and you could go into them in depth, but super important that we look after habitats. And I think that's, sorry to expand on the question, but that's something that's been overlooked in the past, is the ecological crisis. Whereas a lot of the focus has been on climate change, we sort of overlooked the fact that our ecosystems are in trouble. And that's why something like Extinction the Facts is such an important documentary, because it really does bring that home.
Great, thank you. Just had another comment from Joy. She's talked to Stephanie, I think one of the users. Stephanie, I wish that were the case, talking about planting trees. Unfortunately, they are a PFI school, and any changes such as planting, even on a small scale, have to be signed off by them. And that's difficult, isn't it, if you're constrained in the choices that you can make as a school. And it's about educating also the people who are making those decisions. Sometimes that's through the children's voice themselves. They're the powerful voices that can carry these messages. But yeah, that's a real issue, and thanks for writing that, Joy. And then again, another comment, and I assume lots of plants will help to purify or improve air quality, which is a big issue in busy cities. Absolutely, it's a huge problem, isn't it? Even on some of the schools I've worked in inner city London have been in huge polluted areas. You think, wow, cases of asthma going through the roof. Alongside that, it has such a direct impact on our children's health. And again, just making them aware of that will make them want to do something about that. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, David. You should definitely put your feet up next week as you return home after your busy 3-week journey. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Anything else you want to share with us before you go?
Just to say once again, if you're interested in my journey and about hearing about more of these wonderful and amazing environmental projects that I've been visiting, then visit the website journeyofhope.co and learn a bit more about some of the places I've been to and sign up for the free resources.
Great. David, thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Tim.
And we'll also be releasing part of this interview as its own quickfire write resource on our website, litfilmfest.com, in the future. So keep your eyes peeled. Don't forget also to check out all of our other resources on litfilmfest.com, because we do, in fact, have... Oh, hi, David. There you are. Hello. You come back. Scratching your head. We do actually have plenty of eco resources online, such as Take a Stand, or Plastic Times, that can get your kids writing newspaper resources or open letters to make the people in charge really sit up and listen to your children. We've had some amazing films that have been made, and even some being shown on the BBC and being brought up in Parliament. So your children's voice in the classroom can really go far and make a big difference. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us on LitFilmFest Live this week. I'll see you next week, where we'll be having another author. Take care, everyone. Bye.